G point of the earth. The Kunlun Mountains are covered with snow, and the Kunlun Mountains are covered with green grass, and the breeze is breezy. The snow sculpture flies proudly between the blue sky and the snow-capped mountains, constantly watching the rock sheep grazing on the cliff. If it weren't for an ugly scar nearly 20 meters long on the green grass, this place could be called a paradise on earth. Whether it is snow, grass, breeze, snow sculptures, or shale, it is not very important to Yunchuan, who is working hard to dig geological trenches. It is more important for him to dig a 20 meter long, 80 cm wide upper mouth, 50 cm width at the bottom, and 80 cm depth. The meaning of 3,000 yuan for a trough is too important to him. Even if it destroys the general environment of the fairyland here, it is nothing remarkable. To dig one more trough, it would cost 3,000 more, and it would be one step closer to the wedding that I expected. The fiancée is not a beauty, and she is not so good in figure, but she is very suitable for marriage. For the wedding, Yunchuan is not so eager for it. The things that should be done on the wedding eve were done a year ago. The reason for trying to make money for a wedding is just to satisfy the ritual sense of the parents-in-law, and fiancé. As for him, no one cares, only whether he can get more money to dress up a wedding that has little to do with love. The G point of parents is that as long as their sons get married, they have fulfilled their responsibilities as parents. The G point of the parents-in-law is to marry their mediocre daughter lively, so that they can be proud of their relatives and friends. Fiancé's jsput is not on the body, but on the beautiful Ziyuhi clothes. As for Yunchuan's jsput, it is how to satisfy these people's jsputs. Such a jsput naturally cannot arouse his excitement at any level, it is just a hard work. Sometimes he doesn't understand why he wants to live like this, but there is no answer. I can't get excited, and I am very tired from working, especially in the semi-high altitude area at the foot of Kunlun Mountain. The pickaxe broke through the virgin land. What he, the geological team member, has to do now, is to break through the ancient virgin land to see if there are any treasures underground. The cross-section of a deep valley where he dug has nothing peculiar except for rubble. He was not disappointed. Digging a trough is like this, 100 troughs can have one meaning, that's a great thing. Seeing that the exploration trough was about to be completed, Yunchuan looked up at the majestic Kunlun Mountains, and then at the ground that was broken by him, gritted his teeth, and then he lifted his pickaxe into a heavy planing. The head of the pickaxe was planed on a giant drum, and a desolate drum sound rang, and the pickaxe bounced up high, and escaped from Yunchuan's hand. It passed by his ear and disappeared. Yunchuan had no time to rejoice, and found that his hands had been shaken into a cloud of blood mist by the sound waves visible to the naked eye. A tingling sensation was transmitted to the brain, and his body exploded into a larger cloud of blood. Before his eyeballs turned into powder, he seemed to see that the snow-capped Kunlun Mountains had turned golden. It seemed that there was a majestic palace looming. Chapter 2. When you put yourself in the same position as food or goods, your mentality will be very stable. Anyway, it's already food, it depends on who ate it. Compared with wolves, Yunchuan feels that feeding tigers by himself is actually a good choice. At least, the tiger's mouth is very big, and there is a possibility of swallowing himself. It is a pity that even though the tiger is powerful, it still seems a little weak in the face of the siege of this huge wolf pack. Because Yunchuan clearly saw that the surrounding bison corpses had been dragged away by some wolves. A green wolf bit on the tiger's back fiercely. The tiger roared and rolled on the spot. When it stood up again, the wolf still did not let go. Just when the tiger wanted to drag the wolf, there were two more. The green wolf pounced on the tiger, one bit the tiger's shoulder blade, and the other wolf bit the tiger's tail. The tiger man stood up, hooked a wolf with its steel hook-like claws, and he just took the wolf from its body. Then Yunchuan saw that the tiger's big mouth had actually crushed the wolf's head. At this time, the tiger's tail was flicked sideways, hitting the wolf that bit its tail on the ground, and the other paw had already hooked the wolf that bit its back. Held it firmly with his paws, bit the wolf's top skin and tore it forcefully. The wolf skin was actually torn off in half. The tiger opened its blood-stained mouth and roared wow, coupled with the screams of the skinned wolf that it was holding down, causing the wolves that were about to besiege it to retreat continuously. Yunchuan sighed, and covered the eyes of Little Bison with his hands. This was the only thing he, the king, could do for it. At this point in the fight, it should stop. Either the tiger runs away or the wolves run away. However, seeing the pack of wolves gather up again, Yunchuan felt that he was more likely to become wolf dung. Sure enough, the scarred tiger finally retreated. It glanced at Yunchuan, which was less than 10 meters away. His eyes were full of dismay, and then ran towards a gap left by a pack of wolves. The wolves chased the tiger and ran away. Yunchuan has no idea of being saved. He works in the field all year round. He knows what wolf's attitude towards food is. There is no possibility of giving up his plump food. Just when he felt tired and prepared to rest against the little bison's head, the little bison stood up and ran again. A green wolf swiftly passed over Yunchuan's head and was chasing the little bison. Yunchuan can't do anything. Fortunately, a wild strawberry in the middle of the grass is already ripe, so he immediately picked it off and held it in his mouth to enjoy the last touch of sweetness that the world gave him. A strange sound came from not far away, and Yunchuan immediately craned his neck and looked around. Unfortunately, his neck was too short and the weeds were too high to see anything. However, the wolves seemed to have forgotten his existence, and all of them craned their necks and howled to the sky. Immediately, looking through the grass, a group of naked humanoid animals with fur tied around their waists, holding bamboo spears, and wooden sticks rushed from all directions. Yunchuan only saw a pair of big feet crossing his head, and also saw a lot of that belonged to men or women. Looking down at his little tits, Yunchuan is sure that these people are his kind. It was too late to think about why his own kind is so unruffled. He immediately thought of his situation. In an infant state, he cannot survive alone in the wild. Just experienced an unspeakable weird thing, Yunchuan felt that he had no chance to choose the person who raised him. And the cub state of human beings is the most attractive form. He thinks that as long as these people are not hard-hearted, they will take him in. Therefore, Yunchuan fell on the ground and made a ya-ya sound to attract the attention of these people. Unfortunately, those people seemed to be more interested in the beef on the ground and turned a blind eye to him, a small person. The wolves run away. Just when Yunchuan was happy for his luck, he saw another murder. A man carried a dead wolf on his back and was knocked on his head by a person behind him. Then, the man fell to the ground like a sack. Immediately afterwards, Yunchuan saw more murders. The woman who had just held her chest to seduce a man pierced the man's neck with a bone spur, and just drove away a wolf's two partners. Throwing the other to the ground, desperately pinching the opponent's neck, while the other party kept hitting the guy's head with the stone fast. Yunchuan saw a man with his mouth widened, snapped off the other's throat, and drank blood. He also saw a man pierce a woman's stomach with a spear until he nailed the other person to death. Just stop above the ground. Yunchuan closed his eyes in pain. He understands why the tiger fights with the wolves, and also understands the reason why the wolves fight the tigers desperately. But these humanoid animals are killing each other. A group of people were finally beaten away, and the remaining group held bamboo spears and weapons such as stone axes yelled happily. The little bison's escape was unsuccessful. It was carried away. The beef and wolf corpses all over the floor were carried on the back. When a bearded man passed by Yunchuan, he lifted his leg and picked him up. Putting his body under his nose and sniffing, the treatment is no different from those of beef. This is not a benevolent race. Yunchuan looked at the sky desperately. He hoped that God would return his disappeared flesh and blood to him. God can't crush a strong Yunchuan and then return him a baby body. It's not fair. At this time, Yunchuan hopes that the tiger will come back. No matter how bad, the wolves will come back. Compared with cannibalism, Yunchuan hopes to be eaten by tigers or wolves. Yunchuan wailed towards the sky for the first time, but unfortunately, his wailing sound left his throat and turned into a meaningless cry of a baby. The man with a majestic-looking girl who was holding him didn't have a good temper. He shook Yunchuan twice at random, then tied his feet with vines and hung them on his waist. Was lifted upside down, and the world he saw was upside down. The sky was a stretch of green grass, and the earth turned into a lead grey sky. Since he was not roasted and eaten on the spot, Yunchuan did not continue to cry, and even studied the thigh closest to his body. This is a very thick thigh. It is stronger than any thigh that Yunchuan has seen before. It is not only thick, but this leg is more like a sculpture by a sculptor. The muscles are beautiful and smooth. Every time you run, you will be on the thigh. The muscles change smoothly like a beautiful machine. The hair on his thigh is light black, which means that the hair on the rest of his body should also be this color. Through the black leg hair, Yunchuan roughly thinks that he and this thigh should be from the same race. Don't look at this as a trivial matter, for Yunchuan is a big deal. Is a matter of whether he can be parasitic among this group of people. A huge elephant as big as a mountain appeared on the horizon, fanning at the crowd with two big ears as if to hit the team. After a chattering discussion, these people obviously turned, and then, the elephant disappeared on the horizon again. Yunchuan was a little disappointed. A few blue-grey wild wolves appeared on the horizon again. They looked a little unwilling. These people yelled and charged towards the wild wolves, and then the wild wolves ran away. Yunchuan was a little disappointed. When passing by a hilly area, a huge and incredibly colorful tiger jumped into the crowd from a height. Yunchuan watched the tiger's huge claws and scratched a person's head, while the crowd ran quickly and abandoned his partner, leaving a piece of beef, but also shaking his sight. Yunchuan is so disappointed. A venomous snake with white markings hides in the grass and stares at Yunchuan maliciously. He can even see the snake's tongue and feel the snake's cold body temperature. Just when he felt that he was going to die, a big hand caught the snake's 7 inches, and after shaking it twice, the snake involuntarily opened its mouth and was forced by the big hand. Pinch, the snake softened and was hung on the waist by that big hand casually. The snake's head kept hitting Yunchuan's cheek. In order not to be hurt by the snake's teeth, he stretched out his little hand to grab the swaying snake's head. He carefully avoided the teeth with a trace of crystal venom, and caught the snake's head. He didn't want to be pierced by his white skin with fangs. What can a child be wicked? He just wanted to protect himself, but accidentally let the poisonous snake's fangs touch this thigh. The venomous teeth hooked the thigh. Although the poisonous snake was dead, it closed its mouth abruptly, and a large amount of venom was injected into this thigh. Yunchuan was stunned, and hurriedly let go of the snake. This snake doesn't look like a good kind. Whether it is the yellow stripes on the body, the white ring markings, or the 2 sharp fangs, it proves that it is a poisonous snake. The owner of the thigh noticed this, and he pulled the poisonous snake from the thigh like picking beans, so that the fangs with the venom gland remained on the thigh. He took off the poison gland again, discarded it, and continued on the road. Yunchuan has been paying attention to the change of this thigh. After 10 minutes, this thigh swelled up, but the owner of this thigh continued to rush on the road. The venom seemed to have no effect on him. This leg was walking persistently. After 4 hours of walking, when the sun was about to set, the originally swollen leg slowly disappeared. Judging by Yunchuan, the toxicity will disappear after at most 1 night. A bunch of bonfires appeared in the distance. The bonfire was very strong, and it was especially obvious on the mountainside. Chapter 3 Yunchuan's first battle. When the last trace of fish belly disappeared from the horizon, Yunchuan came to a huge cave. There is a wooden fence in front of the cave. There are many wooden spikes on it. This thing should be used for defense. These things are still normal, but there are a few rotting and smelly human heads stuck in the wood at the top of the fence. After the owner of the thigh returned to the fence, he threw Yunchuan and the beef he was carrying on the food pile. This made Yunchuan's feeling extremely bad in an instant. That's right, under him is cold-skinned beef, and it should be a corbel. The hair on the corbel is very hard and it hurts his back. He rolled down from the pile of food with great effort, looked at an unmanned corner, and was about to sneak over. The people in the fence are very happy. This should be the reason for getting enough food. Everyone cheered around another pile of taller food hills. No one cared about the small pile of food. Yunchuan crawled on the ground quickly, he didn't want to be part of the food. His body was caught by a skinny chicken foot-like hand, and the cocoon in the palm rubbed his body like sandpaper. Yunchuan did not cry, so he raised his head and looked at the owner of that hand. This is a very old woman. Even the body of the most aging woman Yunchuan has ever seen. Her body is as black as ink, and every rib under her skin is clearly emerging. A pair of shriveled skins only has 2 skins left. Her chest was like 2 broken pockets. There was no tooth in her mouth, a terrifying black hole in one eye socket, and the other eye was mostly blocked by white clouds. There were only a few sparse hairs left. She hugged Yunchuan in her hands and pressed him tightly to her chest. Her toothless mouth spit out a rotten smell and shouted at others. Yunchuan went on a skin-to-skin blind date with her and found that the woman's body was as cold as a corpse. It was only because of shouting and the rapid ups and downs of her chest that Yunchuan didn't think she was a dead person. It's a pity that the woman's shouting did not attract the attention of others. Yunchuan found that everyone was using wooden sticks to pick up the meat and barbecue, and ignored the old woman's shouting. He couldn't understand a word of the woman's shouting. Yunchuan is very hungry. He burst into tears. The old woman yelled for a while when no one paid any attention, so she stopped screaming, holding Yunchuan to the edge of the fire, looking for a young woman with a big breast, and sending Yunchuan over. There was a child in this woman's arms. He was eating and drinking with one horn in his mouth. Yunchuan rushed over fiercely, and sucked hard with the other horn in his mouth. The taste of human milk is supremely delicious for babies, but not good for adults like Yunchuan. As a mouthful of human milk swallowed into his stomach, his hunger quickly faded. He only felt that the cells all over his body seemed to be cheering. The milk flowed into the stomach and became nourishment. This was a strange feeling. At this time, one more bite can grow stronger, so Yunchuan is not half polite. Not only that, he even stepped on the face of another child with his foot to keep his mouth away from the sex. The young woman is eating meat. She has no idea about the war that took place in her arms. Drank all the milk in her breasts, Yunchuan resolutely switched the battlefield and switched positions with the thin child. The child's body was very dirty, and the woman's body was also very dirty and covered with plant ash. Yunchuan quickly consciously made himself a dirty child on this battlefield of food grabbing, even worse than that child. Yunchuan ate up the milk in the 2 girls. The dirty child didn't have to eat, so he opened his mouth and started crying. The woman who was eating meat lowered her head irritably and found that she had 2 children in her arms, and beside her was the one-eyed woman who was the oldest in the group. She threw the crying child to the old woman angrily, but held the fat Yunchuan tighter. Yunchuan yelled and hugged the woman's neck with her arms wide open, and constantly rubbed the woman's fat face with her face. Obviously, the young woman enjoyed the tenderness of this child who doesn't like crying, so she took a lump of chewed meat from her mouth and stuffed it into Yunchuan's mouth. Yunchuan swallowed. Yunchuan swallowed it. In order to survive, Yunchuan swallowed it decisively. After all, looking at the dirty child lying in the arms of the old woman and sucking the 2 skinny girls, he knew that food was too precious at this moment. It is very important for Yunchuan to make himself a dirty child and replace that dirty child. He can only survive if he completely integrates into a group. Is like 2 young eagles in an eagle's nest. Only by pushing the other young eagle out of the nest and smashing it to death can the other one grow strong and eventually survive. Yunchuan is one of the young eagles, and it is an exotic young eagle. Hiding in the arms of the young woman, Yunchuan looked sadly at the group of people sitting around the fire. Judging from the state of their meals, they were still a group of uncivilized savages. Their tools are extremely simple: wooden sticks, bamboo spears, plus some sharp pieces of stone hammers. They are all the tools they can have. As for eating, even though it has been freed from Rumao drinking blood, it is just roasted and eaten, or even not roasted. After confirming the identities of these people, Yunchuan pondered for a long time, but still felt that it was very unreasonable to find a savage tribe near Kunlun Mountain. The young woman sucked a beef leg bone, full of beef bone marrow, and wanted to swallow it down. Somehow, she gave Yunchuan another mouthful. Yunchuan was chewing snot like bovine bone marrow and exhausted all his energy before swallowing this mouthful of bovine bone marrow full of maternal love. This beef feast did not end until midnight. Yunchuan was held by the young woman and returned to the cave. The cave was covered with hay and the skins of various beasts. The crowd returned to the cave. Yunchuan heard the rustling sound of bed bugs crawling down from the rock wall, like the sound of rain. This voice is not unfamiliar to Yunchuan. He fought fiercely with these things in a restaurant deep in Kunlun Mountain. The young woman threw Yunchuan onto a sheepskin, lying on a stone bed, and snoring in an instant. A tall savage guarded the entrance of the cave. He also had the task of taking care of the fire. The role of fire is not only for heating, but also for protection. In the beginning, Yunchuan could see bed bugs lining up from the rock wall by the light of the indeterminate fire. Later, he saw snakes, spiders, centipedes, and other things crawling out of the cracks in the rocks. Yunchuan was terrified. Obviously, their target is the wild man in this cave. The young woman who just fed him with sleeps well. Yunchuan has no sleep. He didn't feel sleepy either. He originally wanted to seriously think about what he experienced today. As a result, all night, he was fighting with bugs, snakes, centipedes, and spiders. Young women are very popular, and there are many men who come to her in one night, but she seems to be sleeping all the time, letting those men move on her. This makes Yunchuan difficult to understand. However, it can be seen from this point that the women in this tribe belong to everyone, which means that everything in this tribe belongs to everyone. This is still a tribe in the period of public ownership. Yunchuan studied geology. His scope of study does not include modern times, and the time of human appearance is too short for geological time. However, because mining has a historical heritage, and inheritance is a unique habit of mankind, Yunchuan is also familiar with the evolution of ancient humans. Women belong to the Commonwealth, so the children must also belong to the Commonwealth. After strangling a bug, Yunchuan finally understood why he could impersonate a young woman and child. Perhaps, the child who was kicked away by him is also very likely not born to her. Sure enough, when the sun came out, the woman who woke up looked very confused. After Yunchuan yelled twice, the young woman was surprised to see Yunchuan. Took Yunchuan a kiss, then left the cave and sat on a rock with his legs open and started breastfeeding. The early morning sun looks like it was fished out of the water. It looks wet and rouge-like color. After the sun reaches the top of the mountain, it gradually fades and finally turns white. Maybe the woman was full of food last night, but today she was full of milk and Yunchuan was full of food. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. After feeding Yunchuan, the young woman dropped him on the ground and left the camp with a large basket. The men set off earlier, and when these women left the camp, the cave was full of children. As for the older children, they also followed the woman. 6 old men and women guarding these little children. The one-eyed old woman is still working hard in the children to search for the white one last night, enough for her half-blind old woman to see the child. Yunchuan watched her pass in front of her. He was dirtier than those dirty children at this time, especially after he rolled in the carbon dust and was covered with dew. He had an extra layer of carbon dust on his body. It's not that Yunchuan doesn't like cleaning, but that this layer of carbon dust can reduce the probability of him being attacked by poisonous insects such as fleas and centipedes. The dirty Yunchuan must be different from the white boy in the old woman's mind at this time. The old woman kept searching among the children. After checking every child, she weakly leaned her thin body against the rock wall. She forever lost a unique child. The old woman leaned on the rock wall motionless, with one eye wide open. When Yunchuan saw that the ash fell in her grey eyes and she was still motionless, he knew that the old woman was dead. The remaining few old people didn't realize that the old woman was dead until noon, so they carried the old woman's body to the front of the cliff, threw the old woman's body into the cliff, and continued to lean against the rock wall to bask in the sun. There is no sadness, no disappointment, and no legendary funeral. To die a person is like withering a flower, dying a grass, and disappearing a cloud nature. Chapter 4 I became a savage. After all seeing this scene, Yunchuan finally felt relieved. In this seemingly coexistent and co-owner of all the means of production, there is one more person and one less person. They have no concept. From then on, I am a savage. Yunchuan asked himself again and again in his mind. An unnamed sadness rushed into his heart for an instant, which made the tears in his eyes poured out like a flood when the gate was opened, flushing his dark face with 2 white tears. A child was accidentally bitten to death by a poisonous snake. After the old men realized that the child was dead, they also threw his body off the cliff. The poisonous snake came out of a cave. After the terrifying night last night, the cave did not give Yunchuan a slight sense of security. In his opinion, that cave is an amphitheater full of forest laws. Looking at the children crawling around and some babies waiting to be fed, Yunchuan approached the fire unknowingly and lit a small branch. He carefully maintained the spark on the branch and climbed into the cave under the cover of other children. There is no one in the cave at this time. Even a newborn baby was thrown into the sun. Yunchuan blew red sparks, lit a bunch of thatch, and then quietly climbed back to the big platform. Old people are too old. All the heat in their bodies seems to come from the sun. They seem to be alive under the sun's rays. Then, the cave caught fire. This cave seems to be open, and the fire has only risen, and the cave has turned into a huge chimney, and the sound of rumbling on fire is terrifying from the cave. A few old people jumped up from the ground and rushed into the cave. Yunchuan looked at the livestock pen on the left side of the large platform in another cave. He saw clearly last night that the cave was the physical warehouse. The cave here is for everyone to sleep. This fire is equivalent to disinfecting the cave. This kind of thing should have been burned once every other time. It can have the effect of cleaning and killing insects. Seeing that his home was on fire, all the people outside came back. The fierce-looking patriarch, after inspecting the still-burning cave, did not hesitate to throw the 5 old men off the cliff. Then, the incident was over, everyone was waiting for the flame in the cave to go out. This process will not be too short. There are enough bedding for more than 260 people in the cave and a large amount of wood and firewood stored in it. Furthermore, after a big fire broke out in the cave, some of the stones would collapse when they expanded and contracted. If you want to live in again, you have to clean up the fallen stones. That night, Yunchuan hid in the arms of a young woman to sleep. There was no man to disturb her that night. She slept very sweetly. Yunchuan slept more sweetly than her, and there was a slight mistake in what he did during the day. He did not expect that the incident of the cave on fire would cause the 5 old people to be executed by the patriarch. If someone feels sad, Yunchuan will definitely feel very guilty. Nowadays, no one feels sad, and no one stands up to speak for the 5 old people. Even when the 5 old people were thrown off the cliff, they felt that they deserved their sins. Therefore, Yunchuan will not feel sad or guilty. After all, whether it is sadness or guilt is a manifestation of empathy. When slept until midnight, it suddenly started to rain. Yunchuan thought that the patriarch would let everyone hide in the warehouse cave to shelter from the rain. As a result, no. Patriarch took a few women into the cave and closed the cave door, leaving more than 200 members of his tribe trembling in the rain. The men occupy a little bit of dry place on the edge of the cliff. The women, the thin old people and the children can only wear sheep's clothing and sit in the rain to warm each other. Yunchuan didn't understand why these people didn't enter the cattle pen to hide from the rain. After waiting for a long time, he found that some people would rather risk falling rocks to enter the burning cave to avoid the rain than enter the cattle pen. He seems to understand the status of livestock here is higher than that of people. Yunchuan buried his head in the young woman's neck. Although it smelled bad, it was his only support at the moment. The rain continued, no one yelled, no complaints, not even the youngest child cried. The sound of ape monkeys in the distant valley was echoed by the howling of a wolf. The ape's voice was hurried and panicked. There was a bit of sternness in it, and the howling of the wolf appeared to be very long and peaceful. Complaining about God's meaning. Neither the ape cry nor the wolf howl can conceal the elephant's long chirping sound, mixing up like a performance. Yunchuan must paint the current scene in a better way. Before set the fire on, he expected that someone would be punished, but he did not expect that everyone would be punished. The rain in spring is very cold, and Yunchuan can't wait to grow up right away. At dawn, when everyone went out looking for food in the light rain, Yunchuan was unwilling to climb, so he stood up. This should have been a natural process. Yunchuan's will was carried into his weak body. This will was so strong that the body had to give in, so he really stood up. This is a process of pulling out seedlings and promoting growth, and it is not so safe. However, Yunchuan understands that as long as his infancy is 1 day long, the probability of his death is 1 point higher. In the morning, the woman didn't breastfeed when she left. In fact, she didn't have much milk, so Yunchuan ate it last night. A dark woman was left behind. She cooked porridge in a clay pot, or something else. Because it is green, Yunchuan can't tell the difference. From the start of the earthenware pot, the woman kept digging up the contents with a wooden spoon to eat, until she was full and her belly bulged. She added some cold water to it, and finally put the earthenware pot into it. What was green inside fell into a naturally pitted stone. The young babies were crying, and the walking children swarmed towards the rocks. They surrounded the rocks like pigs, and finally digged with their hands to eat. Undoubtedly, Yunchuan is the most clever one. After he dug a bit of warm food into his mouth, he was smoked by the strange smell and wanted to vomit. He punched his stomach to stop it. Vomiting. He ate a lot and tried his best, even if he couldn't eat any more, he filled his mouth with the green paste. Eat too much, Yunchuan is motionless like a sculpture, no adults pay attention to him, only a few hungry children around him, one even sticks out his tongue to lick the residue from the corner of his mouth. When a person has 5 or 6 tongues licked on his face, he will feel that he is food. Yunchuan forcibly rolls away, but no matter where he gets there are always a few hungry tongues behind him. His stomach is very strong, very powerful, the diarrhea he was expecting did not come, and the children who ate the same food with him did not have diarrhea. It seems that children with diarrhea have been eliminated. The flame in the cave gradually extinguished, and there was still thick smoke, and when the sun came out, the thick smoke became thinner. The women who went to the wild to collect food came back, which is not ideal. There is not much food in the spring itself, only some grass roots, grass seeds, and bark can be brought back. Yunchuan also saw a piece of kudzu root and polygonatum. Things. He wanted it very much, but unfortunately, he was taken away by the patriarch. He sat alone on a small fire and baked this thing. The women looked very tired. They sat around the fire and ate the wild vegetables they had gathered. Everyone is waiting for the men to bring back more food, just like the day before yesterday. Unfortunately, when the men came back, they brought back 2 pheasants and a hare. The patriarch was very angry, hitting every man with a stick, and some monophonic words that Yunchuan could not understand were still in his mouth. Supper is naturally lackluster, and eat whatever you get. The patriarch didn't mean to use the food. So, reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Yunchuan once again had the kind of green mash he had eaten in the morning, except that there was more shredded meat in the green mash. Yunchuan accurately found the woman who could protect herself, threw her head into her arms, arched her chin with her head affectionately, and the woman embraced Yunchuan enthusiastically, taking advantage of the time when both left and right were busy eating. A bird's egg was stuffed into Yunchuan's mouth. Yunchuan's mouth was so big that the woman was worried that others would find the bird eggs, so she closed Yunchuan's chin firmly. The bird's egg broke. Yunchuan sucked the egg liquid, but spit out the cracked eggshell. The woman threw it into her mouth and swallowed it after a few chews. People went into the dark cave after eating. The cave was very warm at this time. Surprisingly, people also found a lot of food. In terms of the number of centipedes that were roasted to death on the ground, Yunchuan once believed that this cave should belong to centipedes, not humans. There are not only roasted centipedes, but also roasted snakes, roasted scorpions, roasted toads, scorpions, beetles and so on. The woman threw away Yunchuan and squatted on the ground to pick up the poisonous insects. She was extremely skilled at eating centipedes. After turning her head, pinching the tail of the centipede, she pulled out a piece of white meat from her shell. Pinched the other one. Yunchuan will follow wherever she goes, until the woman harvests a big burnt worm, and then she remembers that she still has a son. The insects were roasted black and black. Yunchuan bit his mouth with only a few teeth. The rich juice filled his mouth and it was very fragrant. This was the taste of protein. Boom! A big rock fell from the top of the cave and fell beside the woman. She didn't seem to be surprised at this, and continued to squat on the ground and search the depths of the cave. Chapter 5. The first thief. Yunchuan followed the woman, thought for a long time, and finally decided to follow the woman to search the cave. He found a centipede from a crack in the stone that was roasted to death by fire. This centipede was very large, half a foot long. Half of the centipede was scorched, and the other half was still lifelike. The woman got the gift from her son, kissed Yunchuan's clean cheek happily, then pinched off the centipede's head, raised her head, and swallowed a whole centipede, just like swallowing a piece of noodles. This night, the cave was brightly lit, no one was sleeping, and everyone was searching for food. Yunchuan, who was full, slept very sweetly. The hay under him is new. There are no bugs to harass him, no centipedes, scorpions to hurt him, and no poisonous snakes to watch his delicious flesh. This was almost the sweetest time he slept since he came to the new world. He woke up very late. If it weren't for the intense hunger that forced him to wake up from his sleep, he would definitely not get up. After woke up, he found that he not only had a drink, but also mixed some high-protein barbecue as a supplement. Everyone stayed in this cave, and outside the cave, the heavy rain was violent. Even the most greedy patriarch did not issue an order to find food. Since it is idle, people can only continue to look for the fish that slipped through the net left in the cave last night. However, no matter how hard people try, the remaining bugs in the cave will not be enough for so many people to eat, and it is not even a tooth gap. Yunchuan waited for a long time, but did not wait for food. The people in the cave seemed to be very peaceful, one by one lying down or resting quietly on the rock wall. It looks like there should be no food to eat. Yunchuan Ao was speaking an alien language to the mother in front of him, hoping to get some useful information, or to learn their language in this way. I didn't expect that this mother would also want to communicate with Yunchuan in an alien language like Ao. Mother is so stupid. Yunchuan had to pay attention to the communication between adults and adults. As a result, he heard a lot of single-character pronunciations, and the intonation was strange and difficult to imitate. From the cooking utensils, Yunchuan already knew that this tribe should have entered the earthen pottery period, and had learned how to raise livestock, how to use fire, and how to make clothes out of plant skins. Then the light of civilization should have appeared. But, their language is very poor, with only a few simple monophonic sounds to express the meaning. When it comes to some complicated things, they prefer to express it in the same language as singing. Once you sing, you must dance. Dance is not a dance in the literal sense, but a body language. This is good. The smart Yunchuan soon understood one thing from the dance of a guy who flattered his mother he once killed a bear. Mother raised the hungry Yunchuan to the guy who claimed to have killed a bear. That guy embarrassedly wanted to pull Yunchuan aside. After all, his goal was a good mother, not the fat child in front of him. The mother stubbornly put Yunchuan between the two. The meaning is very clear. If you don't feed the child in front of her, you can't get close to her. So the man gritted his teeth and took out a small ripe centipede from a small basket hanging outside the animal skin skirt. Yunchuan changed his hand and handed it to his mother. The mother twisted her head while smiling, eating meat in one go, and then Yunchuan continued to show his fat hand to the man. The man took out another one. Yunchuan doesn't eat centipedes, so it's cheaper. Mother, Yunchuan's fat hand stretched out again. Until the man took out two thick-fingered worms, Yunchuan ate it. The bugs are really delicious, Yunchuan puts out his hand again, but the man's small basket is already empty. After seeing that the man could no longer get food out of the man's small basket, the mother hugged Yunchuan and went to the depths of the crowd. The man squatted on the ground in annoyance and knocked his own small basket forcefully. It seemed that he wanted to pour more food out of the small basket. The place where the mother sits is actually very particular. There are women holding children. When those women see their mothers coming back, there will be women holding their children and occupying the place where the mother had just received food. Their learning ability is very strong. When a man came over, they put their children between them. As a result, the things the men gave were quickly eaten by the children. The child does not know to keep asking for food. Indicates that the transaction has been concluded. Seeing that the hungry woman was resisted by the man, the mother laughed loudly and hugged Yunchuan tightly for fear of being snatched away. Yunchuan walked very steadily. This is a very big improvement. He can even feel that his hands and feet are a lap bigger than the previous 2 days. This is abnormal, but Yunchuan is full of expectations. Thunder and lightning flashed outside the cave. Every thunder will scare the people in the cave to cover their ears, especially when lightning hit a pine tree at the entrance of the cave and cut the pine tree in half. They all knelt on the ground and faced the plant burning in the rain. Worshipped by the pine trees. Perhaps the worship has played a role. The torches made of burning pine trees were extinguished by the heavy rain, but these people worshipped more vigorously. Soon, Yunchuan discovered something wrong. These people, including their mothers, were extremely religious when they worshipped, and even fell into a wonderful spiritual world, and their perception of the outside world seemed to have been lost. So that even Yunchuan who stole their food turned a blind eye. The food stolen by Yunchuan filled his mother's small basket, and Yunchuan also ate 7 or 8 kinds of cooked insects in one go. He didn't follow one person's punnet, but stole a little from everyone's punnet, and finally accumulated a lot of things. After the worship was over, these people looked very tired and some people started to eat, but they didn't seem to feel that the food had become less. Not only do these people have no sense of the amount of food, but the mother has no special feeling about the sudden filling of her punnet with food, just very happy, very happy. At this point, Yunchuan suddenly realized that he was probably the first thief in this group. Is also very likely to be the first thief in this era. There may be many robbers in this world, thieves. He should be the only one. When it rained on the first day, Yunchuan had a very happy time. The second day was also good. On the third day, when the patriarch started to let people slaughter the animals, everyone started to cry. Yunchuan was puzzled. The calf Yunchuan knew escaped a catastrophe because it was too small, and the patriarch only killed a sheep. The sheep died miserably. Was stoned to death. The scene of people cutting lamb while weeping makes Yunchuan difficult to understand. This sheep has been fully utilized, and all the edible parts of its body have been carefully thrown into the pottery pot. Yunchuan didn't want to get close to the pot of soup where the offal was cooked. He didn't think that these people could cook the viscera, especially the intestines, into a pot of delicious food. His mother held him close to the pot, making him think that his mother was going to throw him into the soup pot. After all, the fat and fat man seemed to be more eaten than the thin sheep. The mother is very proud. It is her glory to have such a fat son like Yunchuan. Other children in the group have thin belly bulging high, and the ribs are clearly visible. The head is big, only Yunchuan has a big head and a fat body. The whole body is meat. This kind of body is what a healthy animal cub should have. Yunchuan can actually understand his mother's mind. The strong males in the ethnic group are the hope of the ethnic group. Only strong men can bring back more prey and feed the whole family. The patriarch set his eyes on Yunchuan for the first time, took Yunchuan from his mother, and touched Yunchuan's whole body fat with his big hands. Finally, he looked at the prominent male characteristics of his crotch with satisfaction. Yunchuan gave it back to his mother. The men sitting around the clay pot let out a place so that their mother could hold Yunchuan and sit down. Since the lamb became lamb, everyone was happy and threw a handful of moldy dried vegetables into the clay pot until the clay pot was filled. The smell of dried vegetables and lamb entrails was very harmful to Yunchuan, but the people sitting around the pottery pot obviously did not look like that. Their eyes were fixed on the pottery pot until the patriarch took it out of a leather pocket. Some grey-brown powder was poured into the pot, and the people seemed to yearn for food even more. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Seeing Yunchuan kept looking at the leather pocket in his hand, the clan chief took out a little powder from the bag and smeared it on Yunchuan's lips. Yunchuan tried it carefully, it was salt. However, judging from the color, the salt must contain a lot of impurities, especially the grey salt, which is likely to contain some undesirable elements. A thin sheep, in any case, is not enough for the whole family of 300 people to eat. All that is distributed to everyone's mouth is a little bit of broth. Yunchuan gave his mother the meat he had shared. He could see clearly that there was still half-formed sheep dung floating in the broth that the sheep hadn't had time to pull out. Therefore, he decisively chose to feed his mother first, and then eat his mother. Yunchuan started quickly, and the method of making meat was better than his mother, and even the patriarch, because he could use chopsticks, unlike those people who are still fishing for meat in a hot pot with their hands. Even people with thick skins can't stand boiling water. Therefore, Yunchuan can always find meat from the soup pot and feed it to her mother. Her mother was very happy. After her hands were scalded several times, she opened her mouth very happily, waiting for her son to fill her mouth. Thing. This scene fell in the eyes of the patriarch. He did not stop Yunchuan's robbery, and also prevented others from trying to grab food from Yunchuan. He even got 2 wooden sticks that were the same as Yunchuan's hands, and learned to pick up the food in the hot pot. It was very clumsy. However, after several attempts, he happily picked up some dried vegetables with chopsticks. To be precise, he uses pick. The patriarch is the smartest person in the clan, and he is also responsible for the evolution of the clan. His words and deeds will always be the target of the clan to imitate. Soon, the people stopped joking about grabbing food with their hands, and used wooden sticks instead. Chapter 6. This is a great harvest moment. The heavy rain is still falling, and there is no sign of stopping. The turbid waves in the gorge under the cave are soaring, and the mountain torrents formed half a day ago have become more and more intense, rushing rumblingly from below the cave. There are a lot of boulders, trees, and even some wild animals in the mountain torrent. The boulders rolling in the mountain torrent, some even the size of a house, are amazing wherever they go. When they hit the corner of the valley, the whole mountain seems to shake. Signs. Yunchuan sat in his mother's arms watching the rainstorm outside the cave and fell into contemplation. He knew that the natural environment in the barbaric era was very bad, but he didn't expect it to be so bad. No wonder that in ancient myths, there is always a legend that Tianhe leaked. Such heavy rain, it is said that Tianhe leaked, it is not an exaggeration. It's impossible for a Nuwa empress to make up for the sky. Yunchuan looked at his mother's worries, and suddenly felt that at this moment, there should be a Nuwa empress in his mother's heart. The mountain torrents in the mountains should be a dynamic existence that can change the landscape. Yunchuan doesn't know what the place where he descends will become when he grows up. Looking around, there are countless waterfalls hanging down within sight, and the cave above is no exception. The patriarch ordered that the cave should be covered with a thick curtain of grass to prevent the intrusion of moisture. Yunchuan's act of setting fire to the cave a few days ago turned out to be a good thing. The fire dried up the moisture in the cave. Otherwise, the cave at this time must be a wet place. There will naturally be intruders in good places. Especially when it was raining heavily, the animals that lost their hiding place discovered this dry cave for the first time. The first to appear was a large number of reptiles such as snakes, spiders, scorpions, and centipedes. Fortunately, there are still a group of hungry people in the cave. These reptiles have become people's food without exception. Moreover, the way they get food is extremely simple. As long as you remove the grass curtain and replace it with a new one, you can happily catch the crawlers attached to the curtain. Their movements are very skillful. It seems that both adults and half-old children move very quickly. No matter what they caught, they would throw it into the fire behind them, and then someone in charge of baking would remove the cooked reptiles from the ashes. Naturally, large foods such as snakes will not be treated like this. Instead, they turn their heads, remove the poison glands, and hang them over the fire for roasting. They hang down one by one like dried beans. As for the internal organs, they don't remove them. After all, that is also food. Yunchuan doesn't touch these things. It's actually very dangerous. He saw people bitten by poisonous snakes, scorpions, centipedes, and even his mother was stung by a finger-long scorpion, and it stung her on his ankle. That ankle swelled at a speed visible to the naked eye. The mother didn't care at all, she cared more about catching more scorpions. Not only that, she also brought Yunchuan to be a helper, because Yunchuan accidentally revealed that he would use chopsticks to hold a scorpion. Between being bitten by a scorpion and catching a scorpion, Yunchuan chose to catch a scorpion. He soon discovered that as long as a person reaches a desperate situation, he can explode with great life potential. Caught 8 scorpions in one breath and threw them into the fire accurately. Yunchuan believed that if he couldn't catch the flies with chopsticks in the future, he would be sorry for his current suffering. It is also good to do these things, that is, there are countless protein to eat. Yunchuan is already used to eating roasted centipedes and roasted scorpions. Under the stimulus of sufficient protein and breast milk, within 5 days, Yunchuan's body got bigger again. Yunchuan knew this by himself. No one in the tribe noticed, and even the mother did not feel surprised. Yunchuan is now twice as thick as his former children. Yunchuan was catching scorpions, centipedes, and all kinds of reptiles. The children who were feeding were also catching them. Yunchuan watched a young child catch a centipede, and then smiled and twisted the centipede. After it was put in his mouth, he wanted to use his chopsticks to pick it up, but he was a step late after all. When it got dark, the child died. A man grabbed the dead child and threw the little corpse of the child into the rain like throwing rocks. The rest of them were still busy catching reptiles. Yunchuan originally thought that when the heavy rain was torrential, it was when the tribe who used hunting as their main means of livelihood was hungry. Unexpectedly, this heavy rain could bring them extremely rich food. Yunchuan originally thought that the purpose of hunting was those wild beasts, wild ox, wild sheep, wild deer, hare, pheasant, fish, and other things. Unexpectedly, their main hunting targets were all kinds of insects. Wow! A long howl of a beast reached Yunchuan's ears. Yunchuan did not move, but instead set his gaze on the patriarch. The patriarch was very calm, and when he heard the sound, he took a group of men with bamboo spears, wooden thorns, and stone axes and walked out of the cave. The people in the cave didn't care much about this screaming howl. A group of men and women were still busy harvesting all kinds of reptiles that kept crawling in. The voice outside is louder and closer, and the voice is full of threats. He wanted to open the curtain to see the battle outside, but all kinds of poisonous insects crawled on the curtain, which made him give up this idea. 11 people went out. Yunchuan counted them. While holding the poisonous insects with his chopsticks, he paid attention to the curtain. I don't know how long it has been. 11 people who went out and 11 came back. The patriarch and the group were wet. 2 of them were injured and very heavy. After returning, they fell to the ground and fell asleep. Listening to the sound, Yunchuan felt that the roaring beast should be a tiger, which should be a big tiger. The patriarch threw a puppy into the food pile. It's wet, it looks like it's dead. Yunchuan grabbed the dog-like thing. The thing suddenly raised its head and bit his finger fiercely. He was taken aback and wanted to pull it back, but found that this bite had no power. It was a mere growth. Puppy with baby teeth. He withdrew his fat hand, holding this wet thing, not much bigger than a kitten, to the patriarch. The patriarch is painting on the dark rock wall with stones. On the screen is a scene of a big stick man with 10 little stickmen fighting a beast. The beast on the screen is very big and very vicious. The patriarch used a lot of ink on this beast, so that Yunchuan not only recognized this as a tiger, but also a saber-toothed tiger that had long been extinct in the legend. Mainly because the patriarch painted the tiger's 2 teeth too big, the 2 teeth protruded from the tiger's mouth, and each tooth is 1 foot long in proportion. It's not that Yunchuan has never seen a tiger. The tiger's mouth is well closed, and only when he opens his mouth can he see 209-inch long teeth, unlike this guy's teeth that can't hide at all. Thinking that there is such a beast outside the cave, Yunchuan very much hopes that this painting is an exaggerated artistic creation by the patriarch, rather than realistic. Wolf. The patriarch looked at what was in Yunchuan's arms and finally spoke. Yunchuan hugged the wolf cub tightly, learning the patriarch's pronunciation, wolf. The patriarch grabbed the wolf cub in Yunchuan and threw it into a shallow puddle. Not only that, he also rubbed the wolf cub vigorously with the ashes. After cleaning it 3 times before throwing it to Yunchuan, at this time, the wolf cub was already shivering with cold, rolling his eyes to see that he was about to die. Yunchuan hugged the wolf cub and came to the fire to bake this thing. The mothers and the others are still busy. Not only are they busy at the front door, but also a group of people go to the back door. Although it is said to be a cliff for centipedes, snakes, and other reptiles, it is not very different from the flat ground. Just a little time. After the wolf cub's hair is dried, it looks more pleasing to the eye, but its coat color is blue-gray. Originally it should be a big grey wolf cub. The patriarch didn't kill this wolf, but it seemed to be handed over to Yunchuan to raise it. Now, whether this guy can live depends on whether it can eat these bugs. Fortunately, this guy is very sturdy, not only eats centipedes, but also eats scorpions. Even if it is a snake, he dares to challenge him. And compared to cooked food, it seems to like to eat raw food, which makes Yunchuan feel constantly sighing that none of the things that can survive on this land is simple. Regarding multiple choice questions about life, they all chose to live without hesitation. Although Yunchuan has not found a reason to live in their lives, they have to admit that they really want to live. To be honest, their lives are nothing more than eating, drinking, lassa, and mating. Even with such a low-level life, they are still on the most basic level. Is different from the life in Yunchuan's heart. The quality of life of these people may not be able to surpass that of pigs in the pigsty of later generations. Since they can do their best to live, Yunchuan feels that he should have a stronger and more sufficient reason to live, and he must live better than others. When spiders, centipedes, scorpions, and all kinds of insects gradually disappear, it indicates that the rainstorm is about to pass. This torrential rain lasted 7 days and nights. When the rain stopped, Yunchuan ran out and took a look. Read www.yuyuganshu.com and then came back. Because he can't see anything. Outside the cave, there is a thick almost solid mist. According to the common sense of life in Yunchuan, there will be no fog after heavy rain, but the fog here just appears, and the thick can hardly disappear. Sometimes the wind will blow away the dense fog and reveal a line of sky. At this time, you can see the deep blue sky, and you can also see the sun hotly hanging in the sky. The dense fog, almost like a cloud, is low on the top of the head, and sometimes it will fall to the ground as soon as it is blown by the wind. There is always thunder in the sky. Yunchuan sees a bright spot in the cloud and fog, and then it will explode suddenly. The sound is deafening, and soon there will be a spectacle that Yunchuan has never seen before. The rain. Why is it short rain? The reason is that the distance from the clouds to the ground is no more than 10 meters. Once a thunderstorm blows up, the dense fog will rain, and after the dense fog rains, it will become thinner, and then the sun will continue to evaporate the water on the ground, forming a dense fog again, without stopping. No one died when it rained, but died after fogging. This year is not good. The baby died except in Yunchuan. 2 young children who were barely past infancy also died, and the 2 men injured by the saber-toothed tiger also died. Their wounds were suppurated. One of them had a wound on his belly. After suppuration, his internal organs were exposed to the air. Yunchuan even saw his peristaltic intestines. The patriarch is a very decisive person. He personally killed the 2 clansmen who hadn't died yet and stoned them to death. After smashing them to death, he left the cave alone with the 2 corpses, and it took a long time to come back. Chapter 8, Is the Mother a Born Politician? This night, Yunchuan slept well, and his mother slept next to her son. None of the guys who took food in exchange for a spring night with his mother succeeded. With enough food to eat, my mother becomes very proud. The next day, my mother took Yunchuan and set off early. This time, she brought a torch. First lit a huge fire by the river, and then went into the water to catch fish. This time, Yunchuan prepared to grill his own fish. For this, he had already obtained some salt from the patriarch. Scrape off the scales and guts of the fish, put the fish on the branches and bake it by the fire. He baked very carefully, until every fish was cooked through, and then sprinkled a little bit of salt. When wanted to summon his mother, she realized that she was already squatting on the edge of the fire and watching the grilled fish in his hand, the drool running for half a foot. Eating a bite of grilled fish, Yunchuan finally believes that real food can really make people cry. Not only is he crying, but his mother is also crying. This bite of fish reminds Yunchuan of the delicacies he has eaten before, but he does not know why his mother shed tears. Could it be that savages also have emotions? I caught a lot of fish, more than yesterday, but the mother and son were the only ones by the river, and no people from the tribe came. Logically speaking, it's not hard to guess. If you want to catch fish, you have to go to the river. Even if you don't think of this, you can come to the river to catch fish by following your mother. Such a simple logical relationship, people in the whole tribe can't think of it. The mother and the son were full, lying under the willow tree and slept after another. Seeing the sun sink, the mother hung the fish skewers on her body and led Yunchuan to the tribe. We will bring the tribe to catch fish tomorrow. After reading Yunchuan's words, my mother looked very panicked, and she covered Yunchuan's mouth and said a long time. Even though Yunchuan could not understand what his mother was saying, through her body language, Yunchuan understood what his mother thought. It's all here, we can't get enough to eat. Yunchuan pointed to the dry sandy land and said to his mother, those fish will die, it won't last a few days. After her mother understood Yunchuan's words, she sat on the ground and started crying. The cry was extremely violent. She also understood that her food was about to be lost. Today, while catching fish, she has to fight with the birds who her food. Whenever a bird takes a fish away, she will be sad for a long time. Therefore, on this day, her mother is both happy and sad. This emotion is constantly changing. A new day has begun. This time there is a Manchu standing by the river. Everyone is very happy. Seeing the tribe hurriedly jumped into the water to catch fish, the mother did not enter the water anymore, but proudly lit a fire again with a torch. Kept picking among the fish thrown ashore by the people, and finally found the 2 most satisfying fish, just like Yunchuan yesterday, removing the scales, gills, and internal organs. Seeing his mother rudely snatching the salt bag from the patriarch's waist, Yunchuan didn't understand it. However, seeing the patriarch's obedience, he seemed to understand something. This huge fish pond was discovered by my mother, who provided enough food for the ethnic group, so she had the final say at this moment. It can be seen that the patriarch is still somewhat dissatisfied. However, when his mother cooked the delicious fish and sprinkled it with a little salt, and handed it to the strong man who had returned Yunchuan from his waist, Yunchuan suddenly felt that his mother seemed to be a born politician. The mother pays attention to the order when dividing the fish. The people who eat delicious grilled fish the first time are usually strong people, while the patriarch stands in the water and continues to catch the fish. He ate the grilled fish very late, even later than some women. This grilled fish feast lasted for a whole day, but before the sun went down, people returned to the cave. This time, the patriarch naturally left the cave where he lived alone. His mother took Yunchuan to live in, and the salt bag was naturally hung on her waist. The cave where the patriarch lives is not too big, there is still a little dried meat hanging in it, and a small pile of salt is piled on a stone slab. After putting in a lot of grilled and semi-dried fish, it became more abundant here. The smell in the cave is unclear. In short, Yunchuan would rather sleep in the wild than stay in this suffocating cave. Mother looked very excited, especially when she saw a wolf skin. She fell on it and rolled. Yunchuan sat alone outside the cave, guarding the fire. The moon hung high in the sky, shining the earth white, and Yunchuan stared at the moon in the sky for an unknown period of time. After carefully observing the planet, Yunchuan was sure that he was still on the earth, because the scars on the moon were exactly the same as those he had seen before. The heavy rain that appeared before, and the sudden emergence of the river made Yunchuan feel ashamed. Such a major geological change, there is no reason why the satellites in the sky cannot be detected. What makes Yunchuan most desperate is that the snow-capped Kunlun mountain seemed to have completely disappeared from the first day he came. Just as Yunchuan tried to remember the golden palace he saw, the stoutest savage walked out of the cave. When passing by Yunchuan, he smelled the strong smell of blood and saw it at the same time. The Patriarch. The Patriarch was resisted by him on his shoulders, his head drooping weakly, his face was full of blood, and even a string of blood drips from the tip of his nose and his chin, as if he could not die any more. That guy carried the Patriarch and came to the cliff. With a little force, the Patriarch who was resisting his shoulders was thrown off the cliff. Ah! The Patriarch screamed, his voice dragged so long, it seemed that he hadn't died completely. The screams of the Patriarch before his death caused a few wolf howls, and Yunchuan lowered his head and continued to look at the fire in front of him in a daze. The strong guy gave Yunchuan a quack laugh, and finally walked into the cave where his mother lived. After a while, Yunchuan heard their violent gasps. Mother's coup was a complete success, simple and effective, and seized all the opportunities that could be seized, mobilized all the forces that could be mobilized. It was perfect. Yunchuan came to the barn, and the little bison was lying quietly on the ground. Seeing Yunchuan coming in, he called out a moo and continued to ruminate the food in his stomach. Seeing Yunchuan opened the door of the barn, the little bison, who had grown up in a circle, walked out docilely and guarded by the fire with Yunchuan, waiting for the sunrise. The little wolf also came out of the cave. It was a little afraid of fire, hiding in the shadow made by the little bison, and looking sadly at the full moon in the sky. I don't know when the bird's song began to sound. Then there was the call of various beasts in the distant mountains. The monkey's voice was very loud, but after a tiger roar, he closed his mouth obediently, and there was only a stern sound of elephants. Sound completed the final containment of tiger roar. Yunchuan was standing on the edge of the cliff, looking at the distant mountains and rivers, and suddenly couldn't help shouting loudly. An unspeakable flow of heat circulated in his belly. Not calling is not enough to vent the depression in his chest. Sure enough, his shouting is the last king. After the resonance of the valley, it spreads farther and longer. First, the mother ran out of the cave, and then the man also ran out. His mother was very worried about Yunchuan, thinking that he was in danger. As for the man, she was very dissatisfied and seemed to blame Yunchuan for disturbing his good deeds. The little bison stood up suddenly. The little wolf also called out to the man, while Yunchuan sat quietly on the edge of the fire and grilled fish. When the scent of grilled fish permeated, everyone, including the little wolf, had forgotten their unhappiness. On the square in front of the cave, there was only the sound of eating fish. No one asked where the patriarch went, and no one cared about it. They only had food in their eyes. When my mother wanted to distribute food to everyone, the strong man seemed very dissatisfied. Several times he expressed dissatisfaction with his mother giving Yunchuan the best food. Yunchuan smiled and gave the best food to this guy. Mother wants to it back. Reading www.uuganju.com has been overthrown again and again. Yunchuan sighed slightly in his heart. This is the sequelae of the coup. Once politics becomes a habit, everyone will have an illusion in their hearts that they can replace it. If you want to dispel the bad minds of the careerists, there is no other way but to kill, and every coup d'état is actually a serious loss for the ethnic group. But now, since my mother has launched a coup d'état, she has to bear the consequences of the coup d'état. Delicious grilled fish is the only way my mother can win over people. As for the strong man who can't even bite a poisonous snake, he must die. It's not that Yunchuan is cruel, he doesn't do this. This man will definitely kill him first, just like once a new lion king appears in the lion group, the little lion will definitely be killed. Sure enough, the mother no longer allowed Yunchuan to run around, but watched him firmly. She not only had to look at Yunchuan, but also wanted to find ways to please the man who helped her succeed in the coup. The whole clan went to the river to continue catching fish. Everyone worked very hard, except Yunchuan, his mother, and the man who had already become the patriarch. Mother was grilling fish while staring at Yunchuan, who caught the man's lice in his hair. This man's hair has long formed into felts, and the lice on his head are running around on the felts without catching them. As for the felts, there are layers of white scorpions. Yunchuan can still see small lice. The appearance of drilling out from the goozy. This guy is very comfortable lying under the willow tree, and snoring like thunder. Yunchuan found a sharp wooden peg like steel nails, and kept scratching his head with this wooden peg for the man who brought him back to the group. Made that man very comfortable. Chapter 9 I am not a savage. My mother kept looking back at Yunchuan and found that they seemed to get along very well, and she relieved herself and started to smoke the fish with firewood smoke as Yunchuan taught. It takes a long time to smoke fish. Tonight, the people did not return to the cave, but lit a pile of bonfires by the river and smoked the fish overnight. In the evening, Yunchuan also participated in smoking fish, but instead of smoking the fish into dried fish like those of the tribe, he smeared the fish with salt and made it into salted fish. There are too many fish harvested today. And today's sun is really fierce. However, the smell of grilled fish spread far away, attracting many malicious hunters. The little bison is close to Yunchuan, its body is trembling, and the little wild wolf keeps calling out to the wolves, trying to rush into the darkness several times, and finally curled up at the foot of Yunchuan and uttered a burst of calls. Sound. Seeing that the dark place was full of green eyes, the mother hurriedly went to look for the sleeping person under the willow tree. As a result, the man couldn't wake up no matter how he called. His mother carefully checked the man with a torch. As a result, there were no injuries on his body, but the man died. Yunchuan ignited a thick layer of withered grass on the grass roots that did not turn green. The wind blowing from the river quickly made the flames rise. The howling of wolves sounded, and they were no longer silent, but when the fire spread outwards, they fled for the first time. The firelight illuminates the grass, and the green or yellow light spots basically disappear slowly. Only two groups of green lights that seem to be burning still watch the busy crowd not far away. The flame slowly retreated, and across the golden flame, Yunchuan saw a giant tiger. This giant tiger did not escape because the grassland caught fire, but stood on the other side of the flame and looked at Yunchuan with its pale yellow eyes. Yunchuan did not read any mood swings from these eyes, which shows that this guy is a beast through and through. Yunchuan did not believe that a wild beast would not be afraid of fire, so he lit another torch and threw it at the withered grass behind the tiger with all his strength. He found that the tiger's half-foot-long fangs are very suitable for making 2 daggers. The tiger looked back indifferently at the landing torch, until the flame rose, and then turned his head back through the flames that were burning closer and closer, glanced at Yunchuan, and then leaped several times in a row, diving into the green grass and raising it. A straight ripple disappeared. There is nothing to be afraid of, Yunchuan told himself that, but the feeling of despair in his heart was about to suffocate him. After seeing a saber-toothed tiger with his own eyes, Yunchuan's heart has long since turned into a stone. What era the saber-toothed tiger was, Yunchuan knew very well. This thing shouldn't have appeared in the Homo sapiens era. In the time he lived, there was absolutely no possibility of this kind of animal, not at all. Is dead, it doesn't exist anymore. Just like the savage who was nailed into his temple with a wooden prong just now, dead, it was just a bunch of stinky meat. Yunchuan thought so angrily at this time. Kill the saber-toothed tiger, the saber-toothed tiger will no longer exist. Ice Age, Miocene, Pleistocene, these 3 geological ages, no longer exist. Therefore, the furious Yunchuan yelled at the place where the saber-toothed tiger was. The saber-toothed tiger's voice entered his ears one step faster than his voice. That person died. After everyone discussed it unanimously, it was thought that this man was scared to death by the saber-toothed tiger. At least that's what my mother told everyone. This is the quality that a qualified politician should have. Yunchuan just threw a torch, scared away the terrible saber-toothed tiger, and the wild wolf. Everyone saw it, one by one no longer looked at Yunchuan with the eyes of children. Of course, the position of the mother patriarch was also completely sit firmly. Everyone is smoking fish seriously, no one is lazy, and only those who have enough food can survive. Yunchuan does not belong to the working people. He asked his mother to heat a few large rocks and then pulled them into a puddle. The stones quickly heated up the water in the puddle. Yunchuan jumped into the puddle and began to cleanse his dirty body. The process of taking a bath is the same as peeling an egg. After the dirt on the body is softened, you can gently lift a corner to tear off a big piece. As for the hair, Yunchuan didn't know how much ash was used to comb it. At this time, the water in the puddle was already cold. When Yunchuan jumped into the hot pool, all the tribesmen gathered around. They stared blankly at the child boiling himself in hot water. Some young boys and girls also plunged their hands into the puddle to test if Yunchuan was possible. Is cooked. When he walked out of the water, Yunchuan became a sturdy young boy, his whole body white is incredible. This makes the people who are dark, dirty, and full of yellow teeth odd like a god. So, a bold boy also jumped into the puddle where Yunchuan took a bath, hoping that he could also become Yunchuan's appearance. However, it was useless to do so. Their dark bodies, even after they were cleaned, only turned brown. Yunchuan used plant ash and salt to clean his deciduous teeth. His teeth grew very fast, but they were still deciduous teeth. After cleaning with plant ash, his teeth became white. S mother is Yunchuan's most important supporter. She knows how to heat stones and how to heat puddles with stones. So, when she lay in the hot pool, Yunchuan heard her extremely comfortable moan. This night, all the people in the tribe have learned one thing: take a bath. At dawn, strings of dried fish, wind chimes generally sway in the morning breeze. Everyone in the tribe looks at so many dried fish, their eyes are shining. In the daytime, they continued to work tirelessly to catch fish. There were inexhaustible fish in the countless puddles left after the river faded. Not only fish, they even caught a turtle the size of a basin. The tortoise meat was pulled out raw by them, leaving Yunchuan with a complete tortoise shell. The mother used the toughest rattan to weave a bottom for the tortoise shell, and under the command of Yunchuan, drilled on the tortoise shell 4 holes, tied with smashed rattan fiber woven belt. He has a tortoise shell backpack. The tortoise has a green shell, and I don't know what kind of tortoise it is. The fire on the grassland has not been extinguished, and it continues to extend to the distance without any haste. Yunchuan does not care about this situation. Wherever the fire goes, it will drive those terrifying hunters far away. As for the dense smoke caused by the burning, the sky has already been enveloped. The thick smoke is also good, that is, it drives away the big birds that compete with them for fish. After the mother was cleaned, it was still so ugly. The elderly people were still so ugly after they were cleaned. As for the girls who had just grown small drums on their chests, they were also ugly and couldn't look at them. However, when these ugly people look at Yunchuan, their eyes are not right, and many people's expressions are basically disgusting. A bunch of fools. Yunchuan feels that he needs a pair of shoes and a set of clothes now. It doesn't matter to a child to walk the bird every day, but he is still ashamed. With only a short leather skirt on his mother, other people in the ethnic group are of course even more unbearable. The strong men are somewhat better. Basically, they all have a short leather skirt covering their private parts. As for the younger ones, they are all naked like Yunchuan. This is a very poor tribe. There were originally only 264 people, and only 87 strong men. Mother killed one during the coup d'état. He killed another one in order to avoid future troubles. Now, there are only 85 young men left. These days, men are responsible for hunting, and the death rate is too high. There are many women, especially girls who don't know how to grow up. Judging from the early childhood experience in Yunchuan, it is a miracle that these girls can grow up. Children who enter infancy with him will live this year. Come down to him. According to my mother, this year I will take a dozen girls to other tribes for the same number of girls. If other tribes don't have so many girls, then use girls for a pottery pot. Yunchuan felt that it might be better to exchange dried fish, but his mother didn't mention the exchange of dried fish. The truth is that Yunchuan naturally understands that it cannot reproduce in the group, which will bring disaster to the tribe. However, he still felt that it was too much to use a girl to change the pot. Pottery pots are made by himself, and the craftsmanship is still passed down from the famous black pottery pots in Tachin, which is far better than the three-mouth red clay pots used as treasures in the tribe. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. When the sun was slanting west, the tribesmen carried heavy dried fish and set off towards home. There were too many dried fish. Not only was everyone covered with fish skewers, but the little bison carried more dried fish. Finally took all the dried fish, and a group of people took heavy steps, stepping on the burning ashes on the grassland towards the hills. When I returned home, I couldn't rest. How to store the dried fish became a top priority. Mother stored all the dried fish in the small cave, but before storing the dried fish, she set a fire in the small cave again. This cave is the same as the big cave, there are still many bugs in it. To be honest, since coming to the tribe, Yunchuan has eaten more bugs than he has seen in his previous life. I always thought that as a hunting tribe, it should be a group of people holding spears and bows and arrows. Everyone slowly surrounded the prey in the wilderness, and then suddenly threw their spears and bows and arrows, and then swarmed up to kill. Dead prey, catch prey. He even seriously considered setting up traps to catch elephants. The result was ridiculously wrong. Everyone's main food is insects and grass seeds. Killing a wolf is a hero. Those who can catch wild boars and bears are basically seen every 10 years. As for prey at the level of elephants and tigers, it is something that I can't even think of. People are the top of the food chain. This world still belongs to the world of beasts, they live happily and freely in this world, and they are in charge of the earth. Humans can only live by eating insects and grass seeds in places where beasts are scarce. Of course, this is the life of a savage. Yunchuan felt that he was not a savage.